Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by artificial intelligence, I for one welcome the new robot overlords. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Swimona. Dress up when you strip down in the most comfortable denim swimsuit the ocean has ever seen. Dive in with Swimona. Welcome everybody to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I'm Todd.
And this is the podcast where we like to analyze movies to see what they have to offer as, an audience, the writing, the directing. Sometimes every once in a while we'll talk about some of the cinematography. Hardly ever. That's not every single episode of the show for sure. But
it definitely is every single episode.
Yeah. It is amazing, like all the talent that goes into making one film, like especially something, big. Whenever you're thinking about like Steve Jobs or whatever, you can go watch at the multiplex, if you will. But it's people, I think, kind of assume certain parts of it, right? They assume, oh yeah, lights, you're going to have gear and, cameras, and you're going to have a director and actors, and they're all going to be on set, and maybe there's someone doing makeup. But even if you can imagine everybody that works on a set, in the obvious capacity, there's still people even on set that you don't just imagine or assume there's going to be someone there, taking pictures for behind the scenes. There's going to be someone that's medical. Like you're probably going to have, on these bigger sets for sure, you're going to have someone who's, a medic ready to spring into action. That doesn't even get into like the Teamsters, right, that are driving people around, or just 1,000 other little production managers, people on that are, escorting, the PAs and dealing with the extras. Like there's so many people on set that all have a specific function. It's kind of mind boggling. And then you take a step back, just the things around the production, in terms of pre-production, you might have someone that does storyboards. You're going to have, producers who are coordinating all the stuff for production. You might have the money men who are just kind of sitting in meetings and hopefully staying out of the way and just saying, what do you need? And then you get into post and you start getting into the PR reps and people who are going to be there to, give you all the press. And you're going to have artists who are working on the posters. You're going to have a photographer who's probably going to be working on the poster and promotional material. There is an insane number of jobs that goes into every single film that you see. And I promise if you stay and watch the credits on any movie, you'll see 95%. I don't think everyone always makes it into the credits for this or that reason. Like there's times when screenwriters don't make it into a credit just based on what the WGA rules. But the credits are important to kind of verify that, yeah, I worked on that project. And that's why you always see 5,000 names slowly crawl by because everyone put a fingerprint on it. And so it's just all that's to say, it astounds me the amount of talent that I think surrounds our industry. And even whenever I start thinking about our own friends, I mentioned a few episodes ago that our buddy Joe Howes, who made this website that is all about movies and trying to help you see where movies overlap in terms of the cast, the crew. Like you might wonder like who worked on whatever Pirates of the Caribbean that also worked on Rob Roy or Steve Jobs or whatever, and you would just find all these weird connections or all these actors that worked on the same thing. And he built this idea out of nothing. And to really appreciate that, you have to understand Joe Howes does 1,000 things. Like he wears 1,000 hats. He is a coder and a programmer for one of the best visual effects companies in the world, Weta, down in New Zealand. And on top of that, he's an incredible actor. He's an incredible musician. Like he's a drummer who can just kill. And I'm sure I'm forgetting 100 other things, but it just blows me away how multi-talented, I think people in general, but especially once you get into this industry, you'll run across people like him, people like you, same thing. Like you're a lyricist, you're a musician, you're an athlete, and not just like not, I don't know, 1 hour a week or a weekend warrior. Like you've put in some serious miles in training in like triathlons, Ironmans. That's not for the faint of heart. You have to be a considerable athlete to complete one of those, let alone be competitive. And of course, you've been competitive, and so it astounds me, especially on our level, how much talent is around us and how much we put on ourselves in order to, create something. But I just find so much inspiration out of, I don't know, the desire, the passion, of 1,000 different methods that surrounds our people. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, like, who are the other people around you? And I think of like Scott, and just the weird things that you don't connect with movies, because programmers are needed to make movies. It's weird, but they need coders for random things. And there's just a lot of odd bits and ends, because I think movies encapsulate every facet of life, and it also goes on behind the scenes when you don't expect it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Weird. Well said. Well, the one thing about Joe, and I know, our listeners might not know Joe, but we have talked about him before. But one thing about Joe is that one of the coolest things about that guy is that he's a nice guy. Because he didn't have to be, like so many of these people, you could be brilliant, but be like, well, spoiler alert, if you have not seen Steve Jobs, go watch Steve Jobs. It's free on Netflix right now, so go watch it before we start the episode. That being said, you could be brilliant and be an asshole, and then nobody wants to be around you, and that's fine, for maybe 12 people on the planet, right? But for most of us, that just means that people don't want to be around you, and if people don't want to be around you, they don't want to work hard for you either. Or with you, in any capacity. So, unless you're Christopher Nolan, and you can, not that he seems like a very nice man. I have no idea if he's
or a
nice
Hitchcock.
or not
I've always heard Hitchcock was rough.
Yeah, right. You can be like that, and then but it's hard to be like that before you've made yourself. Before you've like made the company, right? Like only a handful of people can be that way, right? Most people, you have to you start the thing and then you become like this eccentric asshole or whatever you want. But like someone like Joe is really good at a lot of things, and he's so humble about it and so kind and giving, and he just does stuff that he likes to do. And that's one of the things that so, say what you will about Steve Jobs, but I live my life off of one quote that he made that I saw years ago, that he made at I think it's Stanford's commencement speech, where he said, if you wake up too many days in a row not wanting to do the thing you're doing, change it. Do something else. And that really stuck with me. It kind of like gave me the excuse to just do what I wanted to do. Not really answering your question though. So yeah, I mean, I think that I think most people, but we in particular, because we like to surround ourselves with creatives. There's a lot of people around us that offer something in this regard. I mean, my wife, for one, she's a writer. She's working on a book right now. She has been. And I mean, you don't have a movie unless you have a story, right? And it's not just about having a story, because it has to be told in a way where people are going to respond to it, where it's going to identify with people, right? I can tell you about a great story, but unless it like pulls you in and gives you some way of investing yourself in it, then you don't remember it, right? It doesn't affect you. And I think that's like Steve Jobs knew that. I think that that's why he put everything into the tiniest detail, because that's what, in most of the movies that we really love, it's in these tiny details that are the reasons why we love them, right? It's not like just this huge, amazing, epic story, which sometimes it is, and in those cases it's beautiful. But sometimes it's tiny. It's the tiniest little thing that makes a movie that would be an 8, a 10. And it could be something as small as one line that one person says, or one thing that they don't say. Like, who knows, right? But it's in the story. I mean, my wife's a writer. Yeah, Scott is a musician. My old bass player, Matt, his brother, has been doing a ton of arranging lately and has become like a really good arranger. And that's an aspect of music that most people overlook. It's like, yes, you can have a song, but unless it's put together in a way that makes sense, like, nobody's really gonna resonate with it. I know so many people, like cinematographers. Oh my gosh, I know so many cinematographers here in Austin. Just to name a few: David Blue Garcia, Andrew Barrera, Rocky Conley, that are really, really great at what they do. And unless they are good at what they do, they cannot capture what the director is trying to, like, envisions, right? Because you, as a director, you can have this vision in your head, but unless you surround yourself with the people that can make that happen without you, even if you don't know how it's supposed to happen, you're supposed to say, okay, I want him, camera left, dirty with a key light in the back right or something, like whatever, and then they just make it beautiful, right? And they just make the scene with a few words. Like that's art, and yeah, I'm surrounded by these people too, and I miss working with them. It's been a while since I've worked with them now because of the pandemic, but starting to come back a little slowly and do a few things here and there. But yeah, it's wonderful to be around these people, but it's even more wonderful when they're cool and when they're fun to be around and engaging, and they care about what you think too. It's not just about them, even though they know that they know what they know. And so you can have input, and it is the best feeling. Okay, so anybody who is semi good at what they do loves being around people that are way better than they are. And it's even cooler when those people care about what you think about the thing that you love. So if I'm in a studio, right, with an amazing producer, and he asks me what I think of a part, or what I think the guitar should do on this, or if I think this is too loud or whatever, I'm like, I don't even care if I give you the right answer. I'm just amazed that you're even asking me. Like, what do you give a shit about what I think? And that is a really cool feeling when you can surround yourself with those kinds of people, and it just makes you want to be better. It makes you care more about whatever it is that you're creating, whatever it is that they're creating. It makes you want to learn more about the subject. And yeah, I think that most of us surround ourselves with those type of people, and if we don't, then we really need to rethink the people that we're surrounding ourselves with. Because if you want to be good at what you're doing, even if it's not to do it professionally, or to be the best at it, you're just doing it because you love it, still surround yourself with people that are better than you at that thing, because you'll enjoy it more, you'll learn more, you'll get better at it, and you'll learn how to respect it more, because you'll understand all the detail and the nuance that it takes to make that thing so great, and why you love that thing, right? I mean, you and I, we watch movies all the time, and it's easy for us to watch these movies and just say, man, that was a great movie, but to forget about craft services, right? Like, nobody thinks about dude, that is one of the great things about working on a set, is craft services. I mean, just anytime you turn around, there's coffee or there's snacks or whatever. That is something that you can overlook, but it's very vital. It's important. Or the third grip, or the second AD, or the stunt double, or just like you said, all of these people, and it's so vital for all of them to be there. If not just for the experience, just because they make it happen. Anyway, I'm gonna stop.
No, I love that. I mean, and even to go a little bit bigger about when you're talking about the people you surround yourself with. I mean, it's easy also, to have an idea that you want to try, or if you're, not an artist or you don't consider yourself an artist, which has such a broad label, and rightly so, because you can be an artist in a lot of things, but maybe you want to try something. Hopefully you're also surrounding yourself with people that encourage you and aren't just going to take a shot at you because your first effort didn't go well, or whatever. Like, it's not to say, critique or feedback isn't useful, for sure, but there's also an attitude or a spirit behind when someone, is looking at what you're doing, and it's more of a statement on them and their lack of ambition whenever they take it out on you. Because I've seen that, man. It's so easy for someone who's not creative it's so much easier to destroy than it is to create and be vulnerable, because creating is such a vulnerable space. So hopefully, we also surround ourselves with people who are, more often than not, are uplifting and encouraging you to, even if they don't get it. And that's okay. Sometimes people create things that you don't like and you don't get, and it doesn't mean, you should tell them to stop. It just means that you're not their audience, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, even when we don't like a film on this podcast, we never destroy it completely. I mean, there are films that we've talked about really not liking, and I can name a couple, but we always come back to, it's amazing they made this. Yeah. That's incredible, and I would say that about really anything. I mean, just to make something out of nothing is really awesome.
For sure, man. Love it.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, what we're going to do today?
We're doing Steve Jobs today. So like I said earlier, if you haven't watched it, it's on Netflix. Please go watch it, and then pause the episode and then come back and check this out with us. Yeah,
we'll talk about a few things. I don't have a ton, but we'll touch on cinematography and some of the camera work, their formats. And we'll touch on music. I noticed a couple really fun, cool things they were doing in the music. And we'll also touch on story and writing, dramatic conflict. It's one of the best things that Aaron Sorkin has to offer, and it's on full display in a film like this. And so, we'll talk about all those things and other such stuff and things and stuff.
Okay, so Steve Jobs takes us behind the scenes of the digital revolution to paint a portrait of the man at its epicenter. The story unfolds backstage at 3 iconic product launches, ending in 1998 with the unveiling of the iMac, directed by Danny Boyle, screenplay by Aaron Sorkin, based on the book by Walter Isaacson, cinematography by Alwin H. Küchler, starring Michael Fassbender as Steve Jobs, Kate Winslet as Joanna Hoffman, Seth Rogen as Steve Wozniak, Jeff Daniels as John Sculley, Michael Stuhlbarg as Andy Hertzfeld, and Katherine Waterston as Chrisann.
If it weren't for me, you'd be the easiest day at Homestead High School.
These people live and die by your praise. So here's your chance. Acknowledge that something good happened that you weren't in the room for.
No.
Steve, do it. It's right. It's right.
Sorry, but no.
Let me put it another way. I don't think there's a man who's done more to advance the democratization that comes with personal computing than I have, but you've never had any respect for me. Now, why is that?
I'd at least consider the possibility that it's because you've never had any for me.
What the hell is going on here?
Nothing. Thank you for your time.
It's done. She's coming back.
You came a half inch from putting this company out of business. Now, who do I see about that? I'm letting you keep your job. You get a pass.
You know, when people used to ask me what the difference was between me and Steve Jobs, I would say Steve was the big picture guy, and I liked a solid workbench. When people ask me what the difference is now, I say Steve's an asshole. Your products are better than you are, brother.
That's the idea, brother. And knowing that, that's the difference.
It's not binary. You can be decent and gifted at the same time.
So many.
That speaks to it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's just so many great scenes. I mean, this entire movie is a collection of great scenes. But before we get into any of that, how good is Seth Rogen?
Oh yeah, he is Woz.
He is Woz.
Yeah.
Amazing. It makes me want for him to have more and more dramatic roles. I've seen him in other really good roles, and I would have to go through his filmography to pick out my favorite. But for right now, in this moment, I'm like, this is my favorite thing he's ever done, performance-wise.
And he's not even in it very much.
No, but he still, just packs a wall up. It's really
Impactful,
incredible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was your impression of this? Do you feel like this kind of added new light to Steve Jobs, or is this basically on par with what you would expect out of him?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it before, and I mean, anytime you can have an insight, you can into, a figurehead like that, in a dramatic film, it's enticing, right? It's like exciting to watch, right? There was, okay, so I remember the first time I saw it, and I was just glued to it because I'm like, anything Steve Jobs, I'm just so enamored with the man, right? And it was interesting to find out, the story about the daughter, that he just barely even recognized that she was his daughter for the first half of her life, and didn't treat her very well, and all that stuff. And I read a book about him, and I heard about that, and I kind of like thought, okay, he's eccentric guy, and whatever, but he's an asshole. He was an asshole, and the whole thing that went down with Woz and everything, and the Apple II, and it was just, it's hard to describe. I'm of two camps, of two minds, right? I'm of the mind of, and we covered this in another episode, I guess, early on when we had our buddy Joe Parsons on the episode for Whiplash.
No,
Whiplash.
No, he wasn't on Whiplash.
He wasn't on Whiplash?
No.
Oh, maybe we just talked about Whiplash.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm of two camps where, like, I get it, and I don't I get it and understand it, and yet I don't think it's necessary at the same time, right? You can be a good teacher and not be a jerk. You can be a decent person and still change the world with a design or an invention. You can do like Woz said, they're not mutually exclusive. But this is his story. Now, as a movie, it was enjoyable to watch, but I felt like there were several times where there was just so much exposition, and I understand they have to give that to you. But I felt like, honestly, so I love Aaron Sorkin. I think he's a brilliant writer, and I love it when he works with Jeff Daniels. I think he and Jeff he writes for Jeff Daniels. Like, he just, I mean, the Newsroom, like all this stuff, it's really, really good. And Jeff nails it. I mean, he's unbelievable in his role. But I felt like so many times it was just lazy. It was lazy writing from him sometimes. Now, there was brilliance in a lot of it, like in the scene where Sculley comes to see, like later on
in 1998.
Yes, when he's about to launch Next, he goes to see Steve, and they have that fight, that argument about when Sculley pushed Jobs out and stuff.
Oh, 1988. Yeah.
1988. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
And they have the flashback mixed in with the story, right? And I thought that was brilliant writing and brilliant editing. and I loved it. I loved like finding out the reality while we were hearing the argument go on, and like, you know, all the stuff. And I thought that is the Aaron Sorkin that like I know and love, but I just felt like it was being served to me probably a quarter of the rest of the time, where I get the idea. We're staying in these spaces. These spaces are home. These spaces of convention centers where we're going to unveil this thing. Get it. Totally get it. And yet there were moments where it's like, okay, Joanna gets up to leave the room and is pulled back in by the conversation. I understand that it's to give me more information as a viewer, because that's what happens. It's like she gets pulled back into the room to give me more information about what Steve feels about his daughter, you know, or what, quote unquote, or what, why he's still, you know, why, like, okay, so the example I'm talking about is, right before they launch the iMac towards the end, where she's like really upset that he's alienated his daughter for the last 19 years. And, you know, she pushes the papers off the table and everything. And they have this talk, and he's arguing with her about why, you know, he's mad that she let her mom sell the house. And then she gets up and she's about to leave. Right. And then he says something, and she turns around and walks back in. And to walk back in and say something and then leave, or say something and then somebody else comes in so that she can leave, I get it. But she comes back in and she sits down. And that drives me crazy a little bit. Because I know it's for me. And I know that we're trapped in these spaces. Like, I'm well aware we are not leaving these spaces. Like, this conversation is an enclosed conversation in this room. We're not leaving this room until this conversation is over. When it's over, we're going to leave the room, and the air is going to change. The feeling is going to change. So I know, okay, I'm staying with this feeling because she hasn't left the room. We haven't left this room. And that feels verklempt, you know? I felt like I couldn't escape it. I felt like I was, being told what to feel, and I didn't like it. I enjoyed the film. I enjoyed the behind the scenes look. I liked the idea of staying, in the convention center kind of like vibe where you have three different things, and not going outside until the very end, which I thought was a beautiful ending. And I love that he addresses the iPod. It's brilliant. It's so brilliant. I'm gonna put 1,000 songs in your pocket. Well, 500 maybe, whatever. It's brilliant. It's so good. So good. It really humanizes him. Then it's, I don't know.
I disagree.
I have
like
so many
that,
problems.
that scene is, to me, yeah, she's leaving because she is mad. She's not leaving because she has something else to do. She's leaving because she's not going to take any more of this. And she put the stakes on the table that, you can resolve this, or I can go work wherever I want. I don't have to be here. I choose to be here, and I'm about to choose to be somewhere else if you don't stop being such a gigantic prick. Because she established also that she's the only person who ever stands up to him. Nobody else stands up to him and gets their way, at least. Like, we see that with Wozniak. We see that with everyone. Like, he gives no one else ground, and she's the only person that's able to push him. And you're right, there is exposition involved with explaining where the daughter is now. We don't even get to meet her until the last 15 minutes in the third act there. But because she was storming out and then he relents, I was totally fine with her coming in and emotionally resolving, their dispute. And now there's an opportunity, and all it does is trigger his next fight, because that's whenever he finds out that, Hertzfeld, Andy, was paid her tuition at wherever, was it Harvard? I don't remember. Harvard. And so, yeah, that didn't, it all made sense to me. It felt accurate in terms of, the emotional stakes writing through, like you were saying, this is an emotional moment with a through line. And once they completed that, yeah, it just triggered the next, the whole thing with Andy and therapy and that whole.
But when you're arguing with somebody, dude, and you're about to leave, you don't come in, you don't cut and somebody says something to make you come back in the room. You don't just come back and sit down and have this conversation. Like, you come back in and you're like, listen to me. You maybe put your finger in their face, or you walk up to them, you get close to them, you try to explain to them in a different way than you've been explaining for the last, 5
But you don't need to do that whenever he's already relented. You're going to keep fighting with someone who's now agreeing with you? No, that makes you an asshole.
So why not leave the room? That's my point.
Because he changed his mind. Why wouldn't she? If I'm leaving because you're being an ass, and then you say, okay, I'm going to stop being an ass, then it's like, okay, well, we can be friends again. Like that.
That's not what happened. He's not. She knows. She's known him for the last. Been working for him for 19 years. She knows that that's not what he means. When he says, I'll send him a check tomorrow or today or whatever. When he says that, it is not because he wants to pay for her college tuition. It's a total like fine, I'll do it. What? That's it. He did not.
I don't know what else you think you're going to get out of Steve Jobs. That's a big victory to get someone like him to do something that he didn't want to do. That's all you could ask for.
No, she knows the only reason he's sending that check is because he doesn't want the press to find out that he didn't pay for his own daughter's college tuition. That's the only reason. She knows that. But what I'm talking about is what I did not like about the film. The way it made me feel. It made me feel like I couldn't escape these places. And that might be because of the way it was set up, because it had to be shot in these enclosed spaces. And a scene takes place in a room, and we don't leave the room until, and I know that Sorkin likes to write somewhat in that way, like where things take place in this, a certain thing takes place in this space, and this space is for this conversation. And a lot happens in that, and we don't escape that until the conversation has evolved into something, right? And that's fine. That's totally fine. The way I just felt, one of the reasons why I liked the scene cutting outside of those spaces,
the flashback
and then back, is because I felt like I would look. I don't have a problem with exposition, right? Let me be clear.
But half of it's exposition, but it's all through, I think, character development and perspective building. It's never exposition for the sake of exposition. It's always exposition for the sake of conflict. And I think that's a completely different matter. It's not like we get a title card that says Steve Jobs is a jerk and doesn't want to recognize his father. Exposition comes through the form of conflict and interpersonal, relationship issues. And I think that's a much more satisfying way to find out information than whatever. I mean, title card.
Yeah, but that's not what I felt.
Okay.
With that, I felt like it was being spoon fed to me, and to be fair, I probably know a little bit more about Steve Jobs than the normal person on the street, right? But I also know more about movies than the normal person on the street. So, and I know more about Aaron Sorkin than a lot of just the normal person on the street, meaning I've watched more of his stuff. So I just feel like he had better in him. That's all I mean. Like, I watched The Newsroom. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
I've watched, like, I know what the guy can do. And I felt like there were times where it could have been better. It was a little lazy. It was like being spoon fed to me. And then there were scenes like the scene the cutaway scene about Jobs being pushed out, I thought was brilliant. There were scenes like the rooftop scene at the end, him talking to his daughter, thought was brilliant. I didn't really care for the ending of him just being this amazing hero dude and then just fades and then nothing. It's just like, oh yeah, he is my dad and he remembered this thing that I did 19 years ago and he printed it out and he had it on me and so he's a good dude. No, he's an asshole. And
you want them to end the movie on him like biting someone's head off.
I'm not saying how they should have ended the movie. I'm just saying, like, they spend the entire movie painting him as an asshole, and then they spend 5 seconds making him a good guy, and that didn't feel right. I'm not saying they needed to end it with him also being an asshole. I think that might have been the best way to end the movie. I'm just saying it felt a little like, okay, it's been 2 hours. It's time to make him a good guy and then and then end it. It's like, no, he's still a jerk, and he's still, gonna do what he does. And dude, maybe that's the feeling that we're supposed to be left with, that he's still an asshole, and yet he does love his daughter, and he always has. I mean, that's the feeling I do have. I do have that. And I thought the music at the end was fantastic. I mean, I don't even know what band that was, but that was incredible music.
I mean, I agree in the sense of,
dude, I don't hate the movie.
Right?
I
No, I get that. Like,
I just felt like there were parts where, like, man, I expected a little bit better. I thought Fassbender was fantastic. Winslet was fantastic. I mean, all the acting was. I mean, even Chrisann, like, just, small roles, but they were really great. Yeah. Everything was really well delivered. So I don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree to some extent about, how they wrapped it up. Like, let's leave it on a positive note, because I don't think you want to walk out of a movie about the title character and hating them. But I think it was also used to the effect of kind of showing that he's a complex character. Like, as much as you hate him, it's not like he's just one big ball of hate and one, I'm trying to not use all of the obvious terrible verbiage of pejoratives that we usually use to describe people we don't like in power. But like, yeah, I think he was just trying to, create a more complex and sophisticated outlook on the guy, because it is easy, I think, to put everyone into one single category, to say this guy was a beast. I've seen people email him, right? Random Joes like you or I email him and get a response and then go back and forth with the guy. Like, and you've always heard, the nightmare stories about how he treats his employees and is really rough. And so it's easy to kind of come in and walk away with someone who that's all they do and that's all they are. And so I just appreciated, because they could have focused, I believe he had another family, right? That with other kids, it could have been easy to focus on, the loving dad that he was to them, instead of the complex relationship that he had with his other daughter. And I really appreciate that they didn't take the easy way out to make him a good guy, but they tried to give him some kind of redeeming quality that showed that as much as he fought against this issue, and you could probably distill it down into what you said a minute ago, like, yeah, he stroked a check to not look like an asshole in the press. To some degree, that's probably why he took care of her in the first place throughout, most of the years. And in the film, they still put a selfish spin on it that goes beyond that. That goes more into, I see myself in her. Like, he could see how precocious she was and how thoughtful she was, and the indication through the writing is that was why he really started supporting her, is because not just that she convinced him that was his daughter, more along the lines of he wants to take credit for the brilliance that I think she has in her. And so the more that he can kind of attach himself to that, the more he can take credit for that. Because if there's one of 50 things you take away from this film, is that Steve Jobs likes credit. Even in that scene, right, that we played a minute ago with him and Woz having it out, Woz, one of the first jabs he throws, he's like, I'd like you to admit that there was something brilliant that happened that you weren't in the room for. And I think that pretty well sums up Steve's attitude with a lot of people and a lot of work. He seems like the kind of person that would completely tear down someone else's work because he didn't have his fingerprint on it. And that's someone that I could never work with. There's 0% chance he and I would have ever got along in the same room as creatives. And it's for that reason, because I'm more interested in letting the best idea win, not in, dictating what's a good idea. But yeah, I think that's all fair. maybe not all fair, but I think a lot of what you're saying is fair, especially with his portrayal and the feel good note. And it, yeah, I mean, that's.
I mean, they had 2 hours to insert little bits of him being kind throughout the film, instead of just like the one time we see him do something that was selfless was at the very fucking end. Like, you have 2 hours. He doesn't have to be an asshole for, an hour and 58 minutes and then be kind the last 2 minutes. Like, that is more of a one-dimensional character than I would expect from Aaron Sorkin. I would expect those.
I think he had way more dimensions than you're giving him credit for, because you start thinking about the conversation with his dad and why he didn't reveal himself to his dad, and you start.
Yeah, but that's like almost at the end.
Yeah, no, that's 1998. But it even early on, like, you're seeing him the way he's trying to rep Woz, even though he's not giving him what he wants, he still respects him and is looking out for him. He's and he threatens. I love when he threatens Sculley in the second chapter, when he's like, "Don't you ever use Woz like that again. I will always protect him and look out for him." Like, you get the sense, even with Hertzfeld, like and you just see where his focus is. His focus isn't on being a good person. It's on getting a result. And it goes back to that idea you're talking about with, can you get the best while still maintaining a modicum of decency about you? And that's his worldview, is that no, you can't. He doesn't think you can. He doesn't think greatness is possible short of being an absolute ass. And I mean, I'll get into that here in a second with the story and writing. Holy crap. We haven't even begun.
We haven't even started yet. This is going to be great.
So I'll dive in right now. Cinematography. One of the first things that's obvious is the way they use film stock. Throughout the different eras, you get 3 different, very distinct looks. And I love that for like 1984, they used Super 16 millimeter film, which is a smaller film. And so whenever you blow it up, it's more grainy. All the grain that makes up all the pixels, so to speak, it becomes bigger, and it's just a little more dated, and it looks very old, much older than whenever you jump into 88. They go twice the resolution with a 35 millimeter film, but it still has this kind of analog texture to it that still makes it feel older, but you've progressed. And then, of course, in 1998, right, you get the Alexa and the red, and it's much more digital. And so you can feel yourself coming out of the analog into the digital age as the story progresses and as the technology in the story progresses. And that's one of the better uses of that I've ever seen, because that's not a bad thing to do. And whenever you're trying to flash back to a different era, or even if you're shooting a movie in a different era, to use film stock in that way, I think that's all fine and accurate and a smart way to go about it. But contextually, whenever you're dealing with old technology and then inserting more dated technology, if you want to call it that, with film, that's a really cool use of it. And it's more accurate than you usually get out of that technique. One of the things I liked a lot, just real by the by, I think it's in 1988, they open up that section with the title card with Napoleon, which was really fun, because it seems to represent, Napoleon was a conqueror, right? And then he got ousted. In the same way, Steve Jobs was a conqueror, and then he got ousted out of his own company as well, overthrown, if you like. And that's kind of cool. Also loved in 88 the way they framed in one section the stupid black cube, the next cube between his daughter and him. And it almost was the way Steve was trying to use it as a barrier between him and his daughter, and the way he used work to come between his relationships instead of using them as a method of, growing closer with people you care about. It was always a technique to kind of keep people at a distance. And I felt like very quickly they kind of symbolized that through just the use of the blocking, the composition of the frame. And I thought that was kind of cool. As far as camera work goes, all over, right? In the auditorium, breaking the axis to 180 rule doesn't exist in these spaces. And it makes sense. I mean, part of it is we're getting a view as an audience member. The other part is we're getting insight into the relationships, and there's a lot of relationships kind of popping in and out. And so we're constantly creating new eye lines, right, with Wozniak in the audience. Now we're creating an eye line, 180 line with him. And now whenever there's someone else on stage, so we're all over the place, especially in the auditorium. And I think that's fine. It works pretty well because we already geographically understand that space. That's one of the main reasons you establish an axis, is to help orient the viewer. And whenever you're in an auditorium, that's kind of built in for you already. You don't have to worry about it as strongly whenever people are already familiar with that layout. And there's these very strong visual references to kind of keep you oriented. And so
I think the strong visual reference is Fassbender.
Yeah.
Is Steve Jobs. As long as he's in the shot, doesn't matter where you cut to, as long as he's still in the shot, you're oriented, because he's in every shot.
That's an excellent point, especially if you start factoring in the idea of a reality distortion field that kind of adds this idea of him being the center of the universe. He's the sun.
Right.
And so putting him on that stage and then circulating everything around him, like you just said, orients the audience and gives this idea that he is the center of the room, even though he's only on one end of it.
Yeah.
It's all rotating around him.
I love that they call that out.
Yeah, the reality distortion, because that's such a well-known idea about him. A lot of Steadicam. And this is classic Aaron Sorkin, like a lot of walk and talk, exploring the space. And it's cool because what I love about it is that they're already in a really amazing space. So why not explore it? Why not use it to the full effect? Let's walk through it. Let's walk through the opera house and actually explore it and see all the beautiful rooms and, whatever, tapestries. And even in some sections, right, they start using it as exposition or flashback, flying things onto the wall to kind of, sink in time with what they're discussing. Like, I love all that stuff, and it plays really well. And of course, in classic Danny Boyle style, 1,000 Dutch angles. Like every 5 minutes, every 5 or 10 minutes, you'll probably get at least one Dutch angle, even if it's not like super tilted. And by Dutch angle, I just mean that if you were to set a leveler on the camera, it ain't gonna be level. Like he's rotating the camera on its axis in some way to kind of make everything off kilter. Like whenever he's threatening Hertzfeld, they have this low angle kind of him dominating Hertz just before he gets into the elevator. And another one is whenever he's teaching Lisa, there's like this close up in the first act whenever she's learning how to use a computer. Like there's all these power plays that they use the Dutch angle for, and it's fantastic, and it adds weight, I think, and just visual interest. I think it's just Danny Boyle being Danny Boyle, which is one of the things I love about this movie. Is I felt like I got to see what a David Fincher film would look like if Danny Boyle got to shoot it, because this was originally supposed to be Fincher. It was supposed to be him and Sorkin tag teaming up again, and late in the project, Fincher pulled off. And I'll see if I can find some articles. I don't think I'm making this up, but it's been so long that I no longer feel 100% sure about this. But I feel pretty confident that he was originally attached to it, getting the team back together, so to speak.
Cool.
Yeah, and I love that because if you consider the Social Network Fincher's version, you could, kind of back to back these movies and look at Steve Jobs as the Danny Boyle film. And Danny Boyle for the longest time has been my favorite director. I think that just recently got upended. I finally relented and made Christopher Nolan my favorite.
About time.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, that's right. But I still deeply love Danny Boyle films, and will watch everything he puts out regardless. But I also I think lately he's been getting more into projectors, like inserting into projections into scenes. Like whenever they're right before they go on with Sculley, he's having that conversation, and they start projecting Bob Dylan lyrics onto the floor and onto the wall. And I love that. I mean, it's something, it's new. He's done it in the last few of his films, and I'm like, oh, that's fun. Keep playing with that.
Was that practical? They do that
I'm
practical?
pretty sure. I was looking really hard at some of the effects, and it looked extremely. If not, I feel like they wasted money in post by doing it in post because it looked too good, especially in the hallway. I was looking at all the reflections with the rocket launcher kind of coming off the wall, and the reflections held up perfectly.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
I loved it. Why did they only do it like a couple of times? Like, why didn't they make that? Seriously, I mean, why didn't they do that more? Really? Like, there were several times where something could have happened where you're just like, oh, cool. It's that kind of movie. But it never was quite that kind of movie because they only did it a couple of times. And it was just like, oh, yeah, remember that projector thing? Let's do that. That's kind of what it felt like instead of like motivated, as like a part of the style of movie making. Do you know what I mean? It just felt disjointed, even though I loved it.
Yeah. I think part of it was probably just focusing on the relationships, the drama in the relationships. And I felt like that was a moment that wasn't heavily tied to any, like the moment between him and that's Joanna, right? That he's talking to in the hallway. I felt like, I don't remember what exactly they were talking about.
It was at the next launch, right?
Yeah.
When they were talking about, the cube and how Apple's going to end up buying next. And
that's right. Yeah.
Or he was talking about the rocket that they launched.
That's right. Yeah. So I just suspect it was because they didn't feel like they would be pulling anything away from the tension between characters. Instead, it's a fun way to kind of build his visionary kind of idea and the way he's visionary in the sense of also how he recognizes what came before, which I have.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah,
I don't know. Which is why I was like, man, that would be good whenever, honestly, like, okay. I'm not trying to say what they should or shouldn't have done, but,
But tell us what they should or shouldn't have done.
Well, I'm just saying all I can say is how I would have responded to the explanation of all these things that I mentioned having a problem with is make it a little, I mean, for lack of a better term, campy with the projections while that's happening, right? If you're going to explain to me, like, show me a picture too, like, because I'm having to explain this, here's a picture of it as well. I'm having to explain this in the hallway, here's a picture of the rocket. I'm having to, say these really important words, Bob Dylan, here's some words of Bob Dylan, because they're very important. Like, I get it. Okay. Yeah. I understand. Okay, cool. We're making it a thing. It's a, you know what I mean? It's not a, here's some information because I think that you need this information, which most people I think did. It's a here's a piece of eye candy along with this to digest it, either better or in a more interesting way. That would have just been nice. But,
okay, no, fair enough.
Yeah.
The music I thought was fun. I didn't have anything for the third chapter, but the first chapter I loved that the music kind of started inserting these Mac-like startup sounds into the soundtrack. Like, it's very subtle, but you can kind of hear it like warming up, and it's perfect for the beginning of a movie because those sounds largely did come out of the boot up sequence from Macs, especially early on. I don't know if they still make that noise or not. I assume, but I don't reboot my Mac almost ever. So
They do.
they do? Nice.
I do mine every morning. Yeah.
And so I love that little touch flair in the music. And then in 1988 they switched it again because they're in the San Francisco Opera House. Everything was far more symphonic and it felt location specific, and I love that too. Like in 98 it felt a little more ethereal with whoever that band was. I feel like it's probably going to be someone super obvious, but
It sounded like the National or something.
yeah. That wouldn't surprise me. That's a really good call. Yeah, you're looking it up?
Yeah, I'll look it up.
Cool. But yeah, I love we don't get a ton of symphony these days in movies, and so I appreciated that, they were using an orchestra and like really kind of tying in the location with it. And it just sounded great. It really added a lot, I feel like, to the scenes and to the era, so that you in every single way, visually and sonically, you feel like you're in a different time period, in a different stage of Steve's existence. Did you find it? Yeah, the Maccabees. I don't know. Interesting. We'll link it in the show notes. Yeah.
Maccabees. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Well done, you guys.
Yeah.
Y'all.
Yeah.
Nice. So dipping into story and writing, on first blush, whenever I heard about this film and that it's going to take place backstage at the product launches, I always have this issue whenever I hear these ideas. I'm like, that's going to be boring. I don't want to what can you possibly accomplish in that? And being Sorkin, it was all interrelational, and so creating dramatic stakes in a movie about technology, Social Network, like, it's hard to fathom that as an audience member walking in, because you're so thinking about the technology, and you gotta get surprised with the relationships and all those dynamics. And that's his strongest, I think, area of writing, which is conflict and creating characters that have stakes in the game, and expressing that and getting it across to the audience and giving everyone an opportunity to kind of feel the tension. Those are hard things to do, and it's every scene, creates that and has that. All the dynamics that run through each chapter, the father, right, Steve, as the dad, and his illegitimate daughter, right, everybody in these stakes, and that's the hard thing to create, is people need to want something. If this person wants something, what does the other person want? And that gives you an area for conflict. And in the father and daughter, the daughter and mom want recognition, specifically the mom. The daughter doesn't even know she needs it for quite some time. She just feels rejected and crapped on, especially with the whole idea of the Lisa computer system or technology, whatever the hell that was. And Chrisann, my notes are terrible. I got trapped in working on my own technology for the podcast. But I also love that Chrisann is a great simple expositional element in certain scenes, especially early on, to identify people. I love, like, the first time we see Woz, Chrisann is right there, and she's like, "Hey, Woz," and that kind of gives us an easy, okay, that's Wozniak. And anyone who's even vaguely familiar with Jobs and Woz already knows who he is and what he represents to some degree, which of course gets fleshed out through their own conflict. But it also, what I love about that is it not only does that, but it also validates her relationship with Steve Jobs. She's not some random person off the street that's saying, this is your daughter. She was clearly someone that was in the loop and knew all his friends. And so by just having these little casual encounters with people around him, we're getting the feeling that he made this jab at her in an article about, there could be 28% of American guys that could be the father. Well, no, because all those other people, she was clearly a part of your clique, whether you like it or not. And that's just kind of communicating to us, the audience, in a very sly way, that she was a part of everything and a part of his world and his life, not just some fly-by-night stranger. In 1998, I love that section between just, going back to Woz again. In the hallway with the daughter, the conflict with the daughter. I love that there's two different versions of Steve Jobs whenever
at the end, you mean?
Yeah, at the end.
Okay.
Because this is right after his conflict with Woz in the auditorium, right? And he commands everybody to stay. He's like, no, nobody move. And he's just going to dress down Wozniak in front of everybody, even as he's saying that he's got his back and he gets a pass. He's going to make sure everyone's clear on who's the upper hand, who's the big dad, and who's the son here. But then you fast forward, 5-10 minutes, and he's in the hallway with his daughter, and he's agitated with everybody listening in because this is his embarrassment. This is the thing he got wrong. And he kind of yells at everybody, "Does everyone have an opinion here?" Like, he is so embarrassed and ashamed of himself at the end of the day. And that's this strange little way of humanizing him and him acknowledging his own mistakes in a very odd way. And also love that, she reads that 1984 article and is outraged. And what I love about that is that Steve Jobs, the man who envisions the future, couldn't foresee his daughter coming across this article. If he had an ounce of foresight in him, interrelationally, he can only see in terms of tech. He can't see the future in terms of relationships. And he's, lightly exposed in that way right there and right then, because he has to come to terms with his own comments and the way he's treated his daughter up until that point. And that's a really beautiful moment. And I love that his daughter is so much like him because she has no problem calling him out and calling him to the mat. That's really cool. And just kind of builds on again the idea that, yeah, that's your daughter, bro. She is like you in every way, except in maybe the most important, which goes back to Woz saying that she has no reason to be kind, or that's Hertzfeld. He's like, she has every reason to be a terrible human being, but she's not. She beat all the odds, and she's an amazing person. And speaking of Hertzfeld, he has the conflict between these two guys, especially early on, is Steve Jobs wants the box to work, and Hertzfeld is like, I can't get it to work. And so they are in a conflict already with what he wants. And of course, he threatens him with public humiliation if Andy doesn't fix the Mac, and which is to make it say hello in that opening sequence. And yet, we fast forward, Andy pays Lisa's tuition, which infuriates Steve, and it felt like, likewise, this was a potential public humiliation that Hertzfeld put on Steve Jobs to get him to do what he wanted to do as well. So it felt like Hertzfeld kind of lobbed the same grenade that Jobs did, and it's very subtle in in the background if you want to recognize it, basically. And it's pretty cool. And I love kind of how their whole dynamic ends, which is that, what sucks, Steve, is that I really liked you. And Steve is like, yeah, you know what? I liked you too. That does suck. It's like, if Steve just would stop being a prick for 1 minute, his ring of friends would have been much greater, is the suspicion behind all that. Even with Wozniak, like the dynamic there is Woz wants recognition for the Apple II. And of course, Steve doesn't want to give it, because then he would have to admit that someone else at Apple was responsible for it becoming a mega success, because the Apple II paid their bills and kept them floating while Steve was, failing. And that's a very simple, tug of war going on between the two of them that lasts and has a variety of opinions, because they're, to a large extent, they're both right. Woz was right. This kept it going. And then Steve was right. He's like, you held on too long. You almost destroyed the company trying to hold on to something. And they both have their points. And of course, Woz gets the best last word when he's like, yeah, you don't have to be an asshole in order to get what you want. As we've said probably 7 or 8 times by now.
But then he, what does he say? He says something after that. He says, stop. Jobs says something after that. So he can't even let Woz get the last word. Like, Woz says they're not mutually exclusive or something, right? You can be a decent person and you can create things and be a decent person.
I think Woz gets it. I'm gonna play it right now.
Yeah, play it.
Yeah, brother. And knowing that, that's the difference.
It's not binary. You can be decent and gifted at the same time.
Oh.
Got him. Well done, Woz.
Yeah, maybe not.
Finally. But right before that, he had lobbed that other grenade. I was like, that's the difference between us. Blah, blah, blah.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so in the flashbacks, when they're in the garage with Woz, I love that framing-wise, Woz usually occupies the edges of the frame, whereas Steve is usually more, in the middle. just going back to that reality distortion field of who's most important. And Woz is always on the edge and never, the focus. He never gets the spotlight. It's always about what Steve wants. Even though Woz got what he wanted in that instance, there was just so much more push from Steve and the way he treated them. And framing. That's just.
I have a question for you. Who do you think is more important, the maker or the idea man?
I mean,
it's okay. Let me also preface it with there's not a wrong answer.
Right.
It's just an opinion, and I'm not gonna attack you if I don't agree.
I think it depends on the situation. If we're talking about them specifically between Steve and Woz, then I would probably lean towards Steve. I feel like he probably could have found someone else that was technically gifted. Now, maybe he wouldn't have ended up being successful, but I don't think Woz would have been long-term successful either. Or maybe so. Maybe he would have built something much, much greater without Steve. But generally speaking, I don't know. Is the recipe more important than the baker? I don't know. I don't think so. I think, I don't. That's really hard. Honestly, I don't have an answer just because I feel maybe I just don't have the big enough ego that I think everyone contributes. It's not a zero-sum game. I think everyone is adding something to the pot, and you need a director just like you need, an actor. It's going to get pretty boring pretty fast if one person is doing everything.
Unless you're the one person.
It's made for you by you.
And right. Or not even by you. I think Steve is the most important, hands down. You can find 100 other Steve Wozniaks out there, but there's only one Steve Jobs. Wozniak isn't going to think of the iPod, isn't going to think of the tiny little, oh my God, the way that Jobs leaves Sculley when he tells him why what was the thing that Apple released while he was gone with the stylus?
Oh, right. I already
can't remember.
The
tells
Palm
him
Pilot
why.
wannabe.
Yes. It's because of the stylus, because you can't use any of the other fingers on that hand. The things we could have done. That is, oh my God, that is Sorkin at his best. It is so poignant, to the point, and vicious
and heartbreaking,
and heartbreaking and true. Yeah. Heartbreaking. That moment, I felt so much for Sculley. I was like, dude, you're over. You're done, man. You effed it up. You had this guy who was one of the greatest creative, designing minds of our time, that looked up to you. He looked up to him. He sought Sculley out.
Father figure.
He pulled him from Pepsi to Apple. He looked up to him like a father figure, and you undermined everything that he stood for. It's your fault, man. You're out. You're done. And I'm gonna cross the T and I'm gonna dot the I right now in 2 sentences. Boom. There you go. Beautiful writing, beautiful acting. It was amazing. But that is the difference between Jobs and Wozniak. It's like you can have 1,000 guys who know how to code, 1,000 other people who know how to design, and you just need to find them, right? But if you don't have the idea to build, then you're just building. And everybody just builds.
Yeah.
Right? It's
that's what Google is. That's what Microsoft is. They build things, but they don't really have a strong concept of design and the way that people want to interact with things. And that comes from a completely different perspective, because I think I think you're right. I mean, he is the most important, person in their dynamic, and maybe Wozniak could have built another IBM, but at the end of the day, it wouldn't have been Apple. It wouldn't have changed the world the way, it has been. And it also amuses me, watching something like this and just ruminating on how maniacal Jobs was about control. And it's reflected in the way, you can't upgrade stuff in laptops anymore. And, you can't install the Mac OS on any other hardware. It's all control. It's all closed system. And for me, that's super frustrating whenever, lately they've just been going downhill with they need a little bit more Wozniak right now, because I could get into a major rant, because I love, I was a PC guy before I got my first MacBook that you hooked me up with. And ever since then I was like, oh, this is so much better. And now I'm afraid to buy a new MacBook because of 1,000 different issues that I have with it in their approach. But also, speaking about how, he left Sculley, I also love when Woz leaves in their argument. He leaves and everyone else leaves. Like, the auditorium starts, going away. Everyone's filing out. And it makes you feel like no one wants to be Steve's friend. And I feel like that was very deliberate with the blocking of that scene, just to kind of emphasize, like, yeah, he's an asshole. I don't want to be here right now, because God knows what he's going to do now. The pain.
I don't want to be the next one on his list
to
talk to.
No, all right. Yeah. And yeah, anyway, so last couple notes here. There's always a lot of rhythm going on in these sequences, and especially as they're coming to a crescendo, a peak. Like, there's a lot of music and editing momentum. If you look at the section with the elevator at the beginning, and he's threatening Hertzfeld, and he puts the gun to his head, and he's like, I'll pull the trigger, buddy. And as the elevator closes, everything kind of slows back down. We kind of regain our breath. The camera moves slow down, the edits slow down, the music itself, the dialogue slows down, all the blocking. They really give you a second to kind of breathe before we enter the next shitty scenario. And to me, it all kind of goes back to the idea, and this setting on its own, with all the relationships, could have easily have taken place in one room. Like, there's no reason you had to go through all these places. And that was just all for visual interest and, to help tell the story. But because all the conflicts, all the drama was interrelational, like, you could have had this in a single room and it still retained a lot of punch and a lot of interesting, like, you could have performed this on a stage as a play, and it would have worked really, really well, because all the character drama was right there. And it's, to me, that's really effective writing, whenever you can take an event like this and figure out how to make 3 jumps in time, effective, and still create story arcs and make me want to see what happens next. What is he going to say next? What stupid, inconsiderate thing is Steve Jobs going to say, next? And you kind of look forward to him being inconsiderate and being an asshole in some aspects, because it's creative. Like, he's never going to insult you by just calling you dumb. He's going to do it in a way that highlights how dumb you are. Like, it's perfect. And that's the credit to not just Steve Jobs as a great, intelligent character to write for, but also the method that, Aaron Sorkin does a really great job of enhancing as a writer. And going back to your comment earlier, like the ending, I really love that we spend a lot of time in that final emotional moment. You got to give people the sense of finality, because if you end that, in 15, 20 seconds, it's going to feel weird and just kind of shortchanged. Instead, we kind of explore the room of the people that he left behind. I feel like that's what I'm getting more out of anything else. It's not just that he's a good guy, but that he left an impression with very specific people in his life, and that, you know, they're still here, they're still around. And it's just a good moment to kind of, you know, reminisce or ruminate on all the people that we've got to know and understand, and how they're kind of being left through his absence. Because obviously the final moment is him walking out of focus. And that's kind of representing that he's no longer here, of course. Last notes with the writing specifically, Sorkin loves writing multiple dialogue threads at once, like often with the same person. Like he's often creating two different threads of thought with the same person. Here, it's still pretty strong, but because every character, most characters I should say, have their own thread, he doesn't have to do that a lot in this film, because normally in this film he's creating all these multiple threads going at once through different people, but he still manages to kind of have you aiming at two different things to add, you know, confusion on purpose to the characters. Like, we as the audience generally know what he's talking about, but it adds confusion, and in a way kind of highlights how much smarter he is than everyone else. The ability to kind of carry on two conversations and aim at two different things at once. Sometimes even, you know, in a dickish way, whenever like he's with his daughter and he's trying to tell her, you know, you got to go to school. And he's like, right now. She's like, yeah, well, okay. The things I like about the song. He's like, no, I didn't mean the song. I meant like, you got to go to school right now. And it's a double punch, just because we kind of dislike him for being so rude and condescending to his daughter. But at the same time, we love her for having so much creative insight into art, into music, into being this already so young, being thoughtful of things like regretful, and you know, that's such a deep emotional well for whatever a 9-year-old to be walking around with, that it makes you adore her and resent him all the more for not being a stand-up human being. But yeah, that's all I got.
Well, he's also so oblivious, like about her, you know, in that scene in particular. She says, yeah, it's an old song. And then she quotes it, and tells him what it's about. He's like, it's a Joni Mitchell song. It's not old unless you're calling me old. You're old, man. She's 9. You're fucking old. Sorry about it. You know, like, I don't, if my son listened to, you know, I don't even know, U2, you know, and he says it's old. I'm like, yeah, it's old. It came out in 88. It's old. But he's 7, so like anything that is from before he was born is old. Like, you know, what are you gonna do? So yeah, he's oblivious about so many things. One thing like that's obvious too. Well, okay. The interaction with Woz in the last interaction with Woz bothered me. Not that it was bad or that it was written poorly or anything. It was, everything about it was fantastic. Like so Woz gets the last literal word, but not really.
Right, because he's still going to go on stage and not give credit where it's due.
Right, and Steve just keeps going. Like, he's almost unfazed after it. And yet he goes backstage with Chrisann, and she, with a few words, tears him apart, tears him down to his studs. The only other person in this film that does that
with Chrisann, or you mean Joanna? Chrisann was his
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, his daughter,
or
Joanna. Sorry. The only other person that can do that that was able to do that, or at least said that she had ever done that, was Joanna. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
When he's backstage with his daughter and she says that she read the thing.
Right. The article. Yeah.
Right.
She breaks him down.
All of a sudden, he's not his normal self. He's this other. He's he's embarrassed, like you mentioned. He doesn't want people around. He feels bad. He wishes that probably some part of him wishes that he hadn't said it because he didn't want to make her feel bad. Like, you know, she's the only person who like actually made him into a normal human. And I think that Joanna is the only other person too. And those are the only two people that he ever says that he loves. He doesn't ever actually say that he loves his daughter, but you know that he does because he has her drawing at the end, and he treats her kindly, right? Yeah. He's the only other person that he loved was what's his name? Was Sculley.
Oh, Sculley, yeah.
Was Sculley. He never loved Woz. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Never loved Woz. The whole thing about like you never had, when Woz said you never had respect for me, he said, well, you didn't have respect for me. No, he never fucking respected Woz. Not from the very beginning. He knew he could find 100 other Wozes out there. He knew he was more important, quote unquote, than Woz, and that's why he didn't respect him. But he never loved Woz, man. He loved his daughter. He loved Sculley before Sculley stabbed him in the back, and he loved Joanna. And he even said it. He's like, why haven't we slept together? Because we don't love. She says, she was the one that says, because we're not in love. Okay, why do you write that?
Yeah.
If that's not a thing, right? And she even says, I'm your work wife at one point in the film. So there's a relationship there that is important to him. And even with the comment that he makes to Sculley about messing with Woz and stuff, like even that, there's just like this air of like, I'm going to take care of them, and I want you to know that I am going to take care of them. There's like this air of like, it reminds me of like doing things for other people because of religion, right? Because I'm a Christian, and so I'm going to be nice to other people because I'm Christian. Well, you should be nice to other people because it's the thing you should do. You should be nice to other people for nothing. But that's not the way that I feel when he defends Woz to Sculley. I feel like he's doing it because he wants to flex to Sculley, to show Sculley that I'm going to take care of him. The same reason why he was going to mail the check for his daughter's, you know.
I don't know, because whenever he flexes with Sculley about Woz, it really wasn't going to. I felt like it was because he knows Woz is fairly easy to manipulate from his point of view, and he felt like he was being manipulated. And I think he just my impression, the way I felt about that was he genuinely did not like someone manipulating him. Maybe because that's my toy and I don't want someone else playing with my toys, but
yes.
But I definitely took offense. I'm talking about the
character, not the writing.
Sure,
you know?
Sure, yeah.
I
Fair
get
enough.
the writing 100%. I'm talking about him as a person, you know?
Yeah.
Like Jobs as a person. That portrayal to me, you know, the writing did what it needed to do. It's fantastic. That whole scene with Sculley, there's not a word incorrect. It's fantastic. I say incorrect. There's not a word that could have been better, let's say. It was just like the whole picture that he's been painting of Jobs up until that point makes me think like he's just saying that because he doesn't want Sculley. He doesn't want Sculley to mess with Woz, but mostly to mess with Woz to mess with Jobs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like you can mess with Woz, just don't mess with him so that he messes with me. Like that's kind of what I get from the character that's been portrayed. You know, it's like, God, what a jerk, man. What a jerk. But you know, like, listen, with all that said, I still enjoyed the film.
Yeah.
I thought it was really well made. I thought it was well written. And I enjoyed it, and I would watch it again even. Yeah. You know, like, which is saying a lot for a film that it seems like I'm tearing down, but I think it only seems like that because you disagree with me.
Right. True. You
know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times on these episodes we agree because we
Yeah.
have very similar tastes in films. And so it's like, oh, you didn't like it? Oh, I didn't like it. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. What do you want to talk about? But in this case, it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's really
no.
that is fun. I mean, it's interesting because we do have two different perspectives on it, and I think people will probably appreciate that.
Yeah.
Kind of like I mean, I don't want to say Endgame, but people could go back and listen to that one and get some similar spice.
Oh, 100%.
But with that in mind, what would you give it?
Okay. Okay, with that in mind, I'm gonna give it out of 10. Generous 7.
I figured that's where you were. Yeah.
A generous 7. If I had a worse day, I'd probably give it a 6. But I've had a good day, so 7.
Nice. Yeah, I'm at an 8. Like for me, this is a 4 out of 5 star. And I think the thing that frustrates me the most about this movie is that it didn't do well. And it doesn't make complete sense to me why it didn't do well. If you think about the social network and the phenomenon that was, and maybe it's just fatigue on Steve Jobs. I don't know, or maybe it's just a bad title. Maybe they should have called this, Thunderbird of computers or something. I don't know. But this has all the ingredients for being a successful movie. Like it's written by Aaron Sorkin. It's directed by, Danny Boyle. It's got an incredible cast. It's taking on an incredible personality. Like all the ingredients are there. The performances are all knocked out. Like I don't really have any strong complaints other than I find it interesting that it just didn't do well in any capacity in terms of box office. I don't know, maybe that other Steve Jobs movie, what was it, iJobs with Ashton Kutcher. I didn't watch it, but maybe that kind of stole its thunder ahead of time. I don't know, but I find it interesting that it just did not do well for a movie that is really well done and capitalizes on an interesting hook. Because to me, this kind of combines Slumdog Millionaire with The Social Network. Like they found a hook in order to kind of keep you glued or give us a reason to go through all these alleys and side rooms while also making it a character-based compulsion. Momentum. Yeah.
Well, so okay. Let's just break that down for just a second. I know this is getting to be a long episode, but let's think about that. I mean, if we're talking about, we're analyzing movies, why not? Okay. So I mean, to me, it doesn't feel like The Social Network at all. It feels like a completely different kind of
Sure. I mean, they're
right?
different. They're different stories and they're different styles, and not just in terms of directing, but in terms of the chronology of it and the path that these characters. Because Steve Jobs is already Steve Jobs when we meet him, right? He's got like $400 million in his bank.
And that's why.
Yeah.
That's why.
Fair. Yeah. We love to see a success story.
You can identify with Zuckerberg, who's done nothing. Who is this nobody cares or likes guy. I mean, the first scene in the movie tells you nobody likes this guy, right? Like, and he is nothing and he is no one and wants to be, but isn't. Like, there is completely opposite from this. Jobs is already who he is in this film, and he is the entire time. Even in the flashbacks, he always is. So it's a what is it, a biopic?
Yeah, biopic.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
And Social Network is nothing like that. It is about Facebook. It is where it came from. And
no, that's a really great point, though. I think people really love to see something be created from nothing. They like to see that process of development and progress and climbing the mountain. They want to see you climb the mountain. They don't want to start the movie with you sitting on top of it and then climbing the next mountain or scaling laterally. Because
that's why one of my favorite parts is or all my favorite parts are like where they're either flashing back, but like in the garage. I love that. I get like out of that space, you know, like get me out of the space. This is driving me crazy. Or when they're, you know, when he's wooing Sculley at dinner, like those are beautiful shots. When he has the longer hair, you know, the longer hair Steve Jobs. But even then, like, who was Steve Jobs before the garage?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like when we hear stories about him being adopted and stuff, like what is I'm just hearing words from him. Like I want to feel that, you know?
I can see this
I mean,
becoming,
obviously those were very strong scenes. So
I can see this becoming like a Genius season 4 or something, that TV show that kind of, you know, anthology that every season tackles a new person. They've done Picasso and Einstein. And this would fit right in really well if we, like you're saying, kind of go back and discover his roots and why he became who he was. That would be a really strong series as well. But I agree with you too. Like I love the use of flashbacks because it does get us out of that space and it does give us an opportunity to scale the world up instead of feeling, you know, boxed in. We add a lot of dimension and scale to the universe when we get to see them younger with the long hair and trying to figure stuff out in the garage, literally. And then the boardroom. And I love that boardroom scene, if for no other reason. It's so moody in there, man.
Oh,
like,
I thought the same thing with the
so
rain and
good.
everything. Just like dark.
And you feel, and I think as an audience member, we also probably kind of enjoy the idea that they're sitting in a room like a bunch of villains, like these boarding execs. Like I love that, you know, it's very satisfying because something evil is taking place as he's getting ousted. And atmospherically, it's beautiful, and visually, it's beautiful too. With that weird. Like they managed to blast the water creeping down the window onto the ceiling. It's just freaking gorgeous in there. But
you know what's funny is when we did the Social Network episode 10 and you recommended Steve Jobs.
Did I really?
Yes.
No way.
I just looked it up. Yeah. So funny.
Well done. And I probably said the exact same thing. Like
probably,
if you want to see what a Danny Boyle Fincher film directed by Danny Boyle, then go watch Steve Jobs. That's probably exactly what I said.
It's probably exactly what you said. Let's go listen to it.
Maybe we are computers. Same inputs, same outputs.
Somebody in the comments tell us if we did that or not. if Wes said that when he recommended Steve Jobs in episode 10.
So what are you going to recommend this week?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So staying on the theme of greatness, I'm going to recommend The Last Dance. It's on Netflix. It's a story of Jordan and basically the last season that Jordan and Pippen and all of those guys were part of the Bulls. One of the greatest seasons of all time. So.
Nice.
It's fantastic. It's unbelievable. And, you know, like a lot of times, you know, you watch these kinds of things and you're just like, oh yeah, I didn't know that or whatever. But the whole time I'm just like, oh, I did not know that, you know, like, wow, that makes so much sense now, you know, like thinking back to those years, those, you know, final years with all of those guys together and like, you know, like the weirdness and all that stuff is just really eye-opening. It's really well done. So
nice.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll cue that up finally. I've been putting it off for whatever reason.
Oh, Wes, you would
eat it
love
up.
it. I mean, yeah, because you love basketball so much. And I'm not sure if you're a fan. I know that you love the Spurs. I'm not sure if you're a fan of the Bulls, but I mean, the Bulls in those years, you
Greatness.
can't not be, man.
For
Just
sure.
The greatest players of all time.
Nice. I am going to recommend, if you enjoy like Steve Jobs, The Social Network, and just some of these ideas of watching someone build a technological and innovating and company. I would highly recommend, and I put you on this a while back, Halt and Catch Fire.
Oh, yes.
It's the perfect analog to this. It's incredible.
Have we not recommended that yet?
No, I've checked like several times because I'm like, I can't believe we haven't recommended this yet.
Okay.
It's absolutely excellent.
Yes.
Incredible cast. The story is great. But you also have to enjoy tension to some degree, like, because they're going to put you on edge constantly. But if you like Steve Jobs and you don't mind characters to hate, you will really, because I hate everybody in *Halt and Catch Fire*. Like, I don't think there's anybody I love.
No, they're all
kind of assholes. But that's what makes it so compelling. Is go watch it. I think it's streaming on Netflix at the moment.
Oh, it is? Oh,
yeah,
man,
I know. I kind of want to rewatch it.
I know. I can't do it. I can't.
It's a lot.
Do that again.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's so worth it, man. Great suggestion.
So stay tuned. Next week, we're going to take on Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig, the first film in James Bond's run with Daniel Craig. So go watch that. Time will fly by. And don't forget to subscribe and review us on iTunes. If you want to leave us a review saying, hey, why don't y'all cover XYZ, then you can do that. If you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Steve Jobs. And don't forget, seriously, leave us a review. And we have one more request coming down the pipe that I've been putting off, but we're going to get to it. At some point, we're going to do Miami Vice in the near future, the Michael Mann film, because one of our YouTuber listeners requested it. And so we'll get to that. And I'll also write down your freaking name. Sorry, bro. I forgot to write down your name whenever I was making my notes. And also want to give a shout out to my man Izzy, as he's back online in terms of commenting. He dropped us a note on our last episode. So
sweet.
Appreciate you, bro.
Attaboy. I like it. I like hearing that. Yeah. Tell us why. Yeah. Leave us a comment. Tell me why I'm wrong about all the things that I'm saying. We'll leave you with a quote of the day from Bob Dylan. I define nothing, not beauty, not patriotism. I take each thing as it is, without prior rules about what it should be. That's really interesting. That's really freeing, I think, and like eye-opening. I mean, if you look at something without prior reservations, one, that's very hard to do. You look at a thing and you're like, that's that thing. But to be able to say that is a thing and it is neither good nor bad, it is this thing, is not easy to do. I mean, most of the time we have our preconceived notions. So if you can actually do that, then you are more woke than most, I will say. But it's also probably why someone like Steve Jobs was so brilliant, like to be able to see, to be able to see the iPod before anyone else saw that, or to be able to see the iPhone and the way it should work, because there's a reason why, an iPhone is an iPhone and every other phone is not, right? And whatever that reason is the brilliance of what Jobs saw as this thing, as a cell phone. There were cell phones all over the place, but it's this thing. I'm going to have no, forget about what a phone is. I'm going to show you what a phone is now.
Completely reimagined it.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting, because without expectations, there's no disappointment. And I feel like Bob Dylan was getting to a very zen state of mind there, where, I'm not trying to dictate to others what that should be. I'm not going to tell you what beauty is. I'm not going to tell you what patriotism is. I'm going to let a thing be a thing, like you were just saying. And that's a really interesting, because I didn't think of that in terms of the way you see it with Steve Jobs, his ability to kind of redefine things and reimagine things, because I thought of it in the sense of Steve Jobs seemed incapable of creating expectations for things. Like, he always brought his own definitions to a thing, and almost refused to let other people define it for him. He was so commanding and controlling in that aspect, and that probably fueled a lot of his fire, not just creatively, but whenever you think of the tyrant, the tyrannical version of him that we see and we imagine, that comes out of people not meeting his expectations of what he thinks something should be. And I'm glad I was never on the wrong side of that.
Oh man,
it just sounds like the worst. It also sounds, I don't know what it was like to be in his good graces. I've always heard that in the eyes of a sociopath or a narcissist, like there's nothing better than being in their good graces. You feel so good. And we never really get that sense in this film, you know, from these perspectives of what it meant and what it felt like to be liked by Steve, to have a good moment with him, or if he just took it for himself. I have my suspicions, but I have no frame of reference, I guess.
Well, if you can't breathe, the best breath is the next one, right? It's like it doesn't matter if he's always an asshole. Just one moment of him not being an asshole is like the best thing in the world, but that's still shitty, right?
Yeah,
it's like it's still terrible feeling, you know. But I don't know.
This is amazing. Like Steve Jobs, I think it's very fitting that we've been so back and forth about Steve Jobs, just because if there's a lightning, you know, whatever that freaking phrase is, if there's a flashpoint of a human being, Steve Jobs is, you know, ripe to play that part. And it makes sense why we would spend almost over an hour and 40 minutes discussing him. Like,
yeah,
he would love to be still, you know, talked about and remembered. And like there is still so much about this film that I love in terms of performances. Like Michael Stuhlbarg as Andy Hertzfeld did an incredible job of aging his character. Like you see him walk in at the end and he's kind of hunched over, and you feel like this is a tech genius. This is someone who is very authentically a tech nerd, and he's got the backpack and he's got this kind of you know, campy walk, and it just absolutely tethers you to that universe and grounding it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, your quote made me think of Steve, because it says, "I take each thing as it is without prior rules about what it should be."
Oh, yeah,
which
yeah.
Immediately made me think of a phone.
Yeah.
Which our phones looked nothing like this 12 years ago. There you go. You know, they were bricks. You know, they had buttons that you pushed that made clicking sounds. You know, you had to hit a button 3 times to get an L, like, you know, like all of these things. And then so yes, he reinvented that, but it's not just about reinventing it into a new thing. It's about reinventing the way that you interact with that thing. Everything about it, from not just from like why it exists, but why it exists for you in particular, and how you do what you do. And I love that they brought up in the movie, they brought up the analogy of the bicycle and the condor, about the bicycle. Though this one thing takes humans from the most inefficient creatures on Earth to the most efficient creatures on Earth. This one thing, and it's mechanical, and that we invented. So and it's physical. So you can invent something mechanical for the mind. All of a sudden, I can sit down in the morning, write a piece of music without touching an instrument on my computer.
That's amazing.
And then put it online, and everyone can listen to it. Now, nobody ever does. But the point is that you can do that now. And you know, the idea of that happening 30 or 40 years ago was just like, no way. You know, like, what is that? No. So it takes people, and I think the reason why we have these kinds of discussions, and like, you know, when we talk about films like Whiplash or films like Steve Jobs, is, you know, talk about these divisive people that change things, right? I mean, it's hard to change things if you're just nice to people. I'm not saying that you can't. Look at Walt Disney. I mean, but Disney had his stuff, like, yeah, he
has a skeleton.
World War II. Yeah. But, you know, look at Mr. Rogers. Great example of a dude who changed the world in ways that we couldn't even imagine, by changing children's lives, by being loving and kind all the time. And that was his thing. So, you know, I'm sitting here making arguments for both sides, but it's just really an interesting dichotomy of a conversation to say, you know, this guy changed the world, but he was an asshole. Yeah, he was an asshole, but he changed the world. You know, like, I don't know what is more.
Would you? Yeah,
You
it's.
know?
I mean, it's an easy question to answer. Of would you rather have a world with or without Steve Jobs in it? And obviously
because I didn't know him.
right.
But if I was his daughter, you know, like, he was kind of, a dick. But at the same time, I'm born, I'm alive.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dad. And I have millions of dollars now. I'm sure, probably, maybe not. I don't. Who knows? Or was like, yes, I think even the people that hated him probably loved that he existed, for sure. You know, but I think the bigger question is like, do those guys have to be that way to get those kinds of things done? Did Steve Jobs have to be that way to get all that stuff done? I mean, maybe in some circumstances, yeah. Maybe in some not. Whom I don't know those circumstances. I'm not pretending to know.
Yeah.
But it's just it's a very interesting conversation that I could keep talking about and debating about, you know, like, I mean, look, you know, we're talking and debating, you know, about movie stuff, but I'm sure like this is one of those examples where you could pick a side and I could pick a side and we could debate and then we could flip sides and debate.
Yeah, so true.
It's like, and it's just like really interesting because I find myself wanting to make an argument, not wanting to argue, but just wanting to make an argument. You know, if you say something and I agree with it, but I want to argue with it because I see the other side and vice versa.
I mean, it's such a strong, compelling argument that, you know, the fear is such a huge motivator in our biology. Like, we respond so much stronger to fear than we do to love. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
You're right.
that's
Right.
evolutionarily we had more impetus to, right? If you want to live, you pay attention when things are scary. And that's how you get to, you know, send your genes on to the next person, is by being able to be scared faster than the guy next to you, to some degree, you know. And I mean, you can obviously extrapolate that to see why, you know, we respond to the types of news articles that we do and the headlines and yada yada. Is that generally speaking, we are very responsive to fear, and so whenever you're trying to get the best out of someone, like making them afraid of you, can probably get you a lot of results. Now, if you don't have tons and tons of money to throw at them, then you probably won't be able to do it for very long.
Yeah. Or at all.
Or at all.
But yeah.
Yeah. It's
Unless you're just like, you know, the bully on the school ground. And
True.
Nobody wants to be that guy. You know?
violence, man.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry I went on a little soapbox there. But
good.
it's fun. Every now and then, you know, you get a little bit more than movies on the podcast. But we like it, that's after the movie discussion. Right? So if you're still listening, one, you're crazy. And two, you're welcome. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us and sticking with us this whole time. If you're still here, make sure, like Wes said, join us next week. We'll be covering Casino Royale. And yeah, I really enjoyed this, man. Thanks for the discussion and the dialogue and the debate. It's fantastic.
Good stuff.
Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch the movies.